Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on avoiding burnout. So we've got four brave people up here joining me today. One of the things you would hate to do on a topic like this is to do something that would contribute to your wife's burnout. So that's why we have three men up here without our wives. And Marlon was certain that his wife would be not burnt out by this. She was trying to get a fellow lady to come up here and be with us, but we didn't get that accomplished. So we're going to wing it here and share about some experiences today. I've been a member of several churches over the years who have had a vision for outreach. These churches went about their outreach and church planting in different ways, but they were all interested in outreach and ministry. Some time ago, I was a part of a church in which the majority of the members were the type who believed in getting things done. Lots of things. And getting them done now. Not next month or next year. We do them now. Thinking things through, discussing how to pace ourselves, figuring out how to live sustainably, etc., were not topics that these people had time for, obviously. Trails needed to be blazed, and the world needed saving. Incidentally, about 10 years ago, one of my mentors, I was talking to him about some of the dreams I had for my life, and he said, "Just want to let you know one thing. Ernest, the world needs a savior, and it's not you." So, thank you, brother. Without that admonition, I might have continued on in the same frame of mind of burning myself out and others as well. Anyhow, as you can imagine, in this church, many people suffered from burnout over the years. And at one point I thought, maybe we should just have a discussion about this, even if there's not a lot of interest. Maybe enough people have gotten burnt out now that there would be interest in having this topic. So I suggested it, and the church welcomed it. And I put together a handout, which you all have a copy of there, for us to discuss as a group. And so we discussed this topic for, something like an hour. And then it was time to go home and get the children ready for bed. And one member said, most of us are going to take these papers home and never look at them again. What advice do you have for us? And I forget what I said, but what I should have said is post it on your fridge. Write these things on the doorpost of your house. You might be the person who needs this the most. Well, it wasn't long until this individual, who was one of the toughest and had not had burnout yet so far, went through a very severe emotional crisis that affected him mentally and even physically. So I just mentioned this to say that some of us can feel invincible, but even the toughest of us might not be invincible. We all make mistakes, so we're not going to be too hard on him. But sometimes our mistakes are because of our own hard-headedness. It seems that some of us are only able to learn via the school of hard knocks. But I'm trusting that you're all different here today. You're going to go home and write these things on the doorpost of your house and put these papers up on your fridge, and you'll avoid some of this. Sometimes our burnout is because we avoided advice or ignored the warning signs that were coming our way. And if so, God can still redeem these experiences and make something good out of them, even if we need to pay the consequences for them. But sometimes burnout can happen through no fault of our own. Sometimes things happen that are entirely out of our control. It could be an attack from Satan. It could be severe health issues. It could be team dynamics. It could be going through church struggles that we weren't really expecting or couldn't have prepared for, those kinds of things. So we don't want anyone leaving today feeling discouraged or condemned by what we say today. God's a redeemer. He can keep bad experiences from going to waste. So we're here to learn together. A lot of what we have to share today is just things we've noticed, observed, things we're going through presently, things we're trying to implement presently to avoid burnout. So with that, We'll get into our first question for today for the panel. Have you ever faced burnout? And if so, we'd like you to tell us about it. What contributed to it? How or when did you notice that something was happening? How did it affect you and your spouse and your family? So just talk about the effect at this point. Don't get into how you handled it or how you would do it differently or what you did do about it. So, okay? So who wants to go first? You ready?
Sure. So I'm not sure if I've ever been burned out, but I think I might be currently seeing some signs. So this is kind of a relevant topic to me, and I've actually been talking to some of the brothers here this weekend, even just for some of the things I've been feeling. So like I said, I think I've been warned about burnout just coming into ministry, and it's been something that has been discussed. And so I guess I thought a good bit about it, and one of the things that I've sort of preached or would tell people if they would listen to me is, you cannot give what you don't have. So that seemed really important to me. But it's one thing to kind of have a little jingle like that. It's the other thing to actually practice it. So a quote from that I think describes how I've been feeling probably in the last year or so, by Bilbo Baggins. He said this: "I feel thin, sort of stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread." And I've actually thought of that a lot, and I'm going to say in the last year, because it almost perfectly describes how I feel. Like there's just not enough of me to go around. And 6 children ranging from 16 to 6 months. And there's just a lot of people in our community that have needs. And I would just say, even just really recently, as this week, I just thought, I don't know if I can take another anything else. And so I'm kind of in the middle of it right now, I guess. And I think he said, how did you notice? And what are some of the things that I've noticed in my life? Some of the things I've noticed here recently that it is a concern is that, and that you all might be able to relate to, is that the things that I really love and would bring me joy and pleasure seems like a burden. And so when you're new to ministry, you move into a community, you're super motivated. And if you're like me, you're thinking, before, I'm not doing anything for Jesus, I just want to do something. So any little need that comes in, it's just wonderful. You're helping this person. It's extremely satisfying. You feel like you're doing something for Jesus. But eventually, or at least where I'm at, it's like those things become really burdensome. And just maybe a month ago, I was feeling really stressed. Our friend from the neighborhood there had a plumbing issue, and I was putting it off. Water was dripping into her kitchen. So finally, one day after work, I thought I would try to take care of this issue. Of course, it's a plumbing thing. I'm not really a plumber. I do it poorly, but I can kind of sort of do it. And of course, I turned off her water and cut her pipes and everything. Anyway, installed a mixer valve. You're familiar with that with a shower. And when I put it all together, here I'd put it in upside down and it didn't work. Anyway, it was just like, I don't know if I can do this. So anyhow, I guess that's where I'm at right now.
Is it on? Is it on? I had some similar thoughts when Ernest asked me if I'd be willing to share something. Have I ever faced a burnout? I don't know that I would say I ever burned out, but I think I am, as particularly in the past half year, and have come closer to it than ever before for various reasons. Farther back, there's a type of burnout that maybe isn't, I don't know if I've ever heard it termed this way, but as I was putting some thoughts together, I thought of relationship burnout. And I know I've had this in the past, where especially when you're involved in ministry, and you want to help people, and you don't know how to say no, and you want to keep people happy, you can come to a point where the very people that you love and you want to help, you begin to resent because you haven't learned how to create boundaries. So I've definitely had that on multiple occasions. It's not necessarily the kind of burnout that affects you mentally, emotionally, physically as much, but if you don't put safeguards up, it could get there. More recently, some of this, I'm not convinced that some of this doesn't just have to do with this phase of life I'm in, but so I'm turning 40 this year, and you hear often about midlife crisis. But you have a growing family. Our oldest is 12, and you're in a church plant, so that's obviously work. And you're supporting this family, and you work for the same place over time, and that brings on more responsibility and more responsibility. And so you have all these pressures building in on you, and it's, again, they're all good, they're not necessarily wrong, but you have to learn how to deal with it. And then you throw on the top of that maybe, okay, so the two things, this all happened in about a 2-week span this past spring or late winter, but there came a day at work where I just got really overwhelmed because for everything that I got done, there was about 2 or 3 more things to do. And I said, how can I ever take care of all these people? This isn't heading to a good place. And at the very same time, there was relationships in our church that had been not good, or at least issues that had not been on a good footing that were coming to a head at the same time. And that was probably, I remember one day in particular, we all work remotely, or a lot of us do. And so we have a phone call at lunchtime. And based on an email I'd sent my boss the night before, based on a comment in a Teams chat that morning, and based on a comment at lunchtime, he messaged me after lunch and said, hey, are you okay? Because he could sense it coming through. And I'll share more of this later in answer to some of the other questions, but he was a very big support. Yeah, I don't know if I could ask for a better boss, but some of those same issues are still ongoing, especially with the work, but I feel like I have a lot better handle as to what to do with it. It's not over. Again, work goes on, and yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I can share more later.
Yeah, well, I tried to convince Ernest that we were overqualified to even be up here on this panel. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying I used to be sold out, now I'm burned out. That evokes a lot of emotion for us as a couple. Because I think it's all of our hearts to be sold out, to be on fire, and that something happens, life happens, stuff happens. And we weren't here for introductions, but we have a large family. We have 10 boys and 1 daughter. They're still all at home, and so we're cherishing this time of, we've raised children, now we're living with adults. Some of them are still children, but it's a privilege and an honor, and yet that brings a level of, like Anthony said, responsibility. We spent a couple years in East Africa, and then a number of years in New England. And looking at, so burned out, absolutely. The last 3 years, unexpectedly, God placed us back in Lancaster County, Effort, the place you leave, not the place you move back to. And yet, God has been in it, and His love and mercy has truly been carrying us as we refocus and heal. And so when I say we're overqualified to speak, I do want God to be honored and glorified and to use whatever we have to share for His honor and glory. And I don't want to necessarily get into, over that span of life, the last 15 years, the whys or the whats, but one of the big things that the Lord has shown me, is showing me, is you can't lead others well. You can't lead your family well if you're not leading yourself. And that's something that I've not done well over the last number of years. In a passion to be sold out, one of the things that I did not do well, have not done well, is to lead myself. and whatever that looks like, and to be self-aware. And when you're in a place of burnout, you hurt others, and we've been there. And yet feeling God's grace in our heart, in our life, in this season of healing, I think, and I'll let Darla share some of the different things, but I would say the biggest thing, and I don't want to pin excuses on circumstances, on others, but what did I do wrong? And the thing that I think God has been laying his finger on my heart is leading myself so I could lead my family, so I could be who he wanted me to be in the situations, in the places, in the church plants that God had us. Yeah.
So the simple answer to the question, have you ever faced burnout, is yes. I kind of wish I could just stop there, because in stuff like this, it brings out the vulnerability of who we are, and especially for me, speaking to the women here. When I met Jesus 23 years ago, I was very passionate, and I remember telling him, I'm willing to go to show you how much I love you. Like, take me to Africa, take me anywhere. And he said, how about I teach you what it is to follow me and be obedient in the home, and starting with our children. And then moving to East Africa, I was so excited after all these years to finally be able to be that perfect, amazing missionary who's sold out, because we were definitely sold out. And followed two of the hardest years of, I thought we already had gone through a hard season. We took care of my mother when she was dying from dementia, and so I was like, well, East Africa will be a piece of cake. And after being there for 2 years and experiencing some very traumatic situations, my dream was to, lead women to the Lord, to lead Bible studies. And at the end of those 2 years, I was sitting in my rocking chair in my bedroom, getting ready to leave in a few short days, and I was telling the Lord, I've done none of those things. I've done nothing. Nothing, but all I've done is feed people rice and beans who are coming through my doors. It was a never-ending stream of visitors and other missionaries and you name it, and I haven't done anything for you. And I remember him speaking so clearly to my heart, you did what I've called you to do. And I think for me, what has contributed to burnout has been holding ideals to a level of idolatry. And instead of recognizing that these ideals that I have, I'm still sold out, but I've definitely dabbled in the burnt out stage because I didn't understand the difference between holding my ideals at the foot of the cross and saying, Jesus, they're here, and I want you to do with them what you want to do with them, instead of pursuing them in my own strength and not knowing how to say no, because I want to make everyone happy. I want to make Jesus happy, and surely if I'm going to make Jesus happy, it means I have to do everything and be all things to all people. And as we all know, that doesn't work so well. And then you add in, having a lot of children, which have been such a gift and a blessing, but as women, a lot of hormones and all those that add into it. And we also lost and buried a daughter in Africa. She was died a few days before she was born, and I remember one night sitting in my room and just overcome with feelings of anxiety that I had never had before, and just going to Marlon and him saying, it's okay. You don't have to carry this burden alone. Let's take you, get some help. And there's nothing unspiritual about being human. And God has allowed me to go through some really hard things, and I think it's because he wants to take that burnout. I don't want to over-spiritualize it, but take that burnout and make it into something good.
Okay, thank you. For me, the closest thing I've been to burnout was a faith crisis about 14 years ago. I had agreed to work in Christian Aid Ministries' Billboard Evangelism program, talking to people from all over the country who called the phone line, some of whom were seeking answers, but most of whom were there to cause trouble. And through all that, I went through a major faith crisis. I remember thinking, here I was doing this for God, and this doesn't feel fair. This feels like I didn't want to go through a faith crisis. I didn't try to put myself into a situation where I'm searching for other gods or something like that, and here I am in this situation. So it didn't affect me too much physically, but spiritually I was wiped. And it took me probably about 3 years until I was back to feeling like I could be a spiritual leader again in any capacity. Then another situation that was heading in the direction of burnout was about 8 years ago or so. We had started the church in State College. There was a lot of things going on. I was expected to lead out with some various aspects of the church there. And I remember one Sunday afternoon we were on our way to church. We just walked about a half a mile to where we were meeting. And my phone rang, and it was somebody else calling to talk about details related to the evening service. And so I took the phone call, tried to work through the issues that planning ahead for a church service, just kind of things you need to do. And my daughter, when I hung up, my daughter looked at me and she said, "Daddy, I wish you wouldn't take phone calls when we're on walks like this." And that was a wake-up call for me. And I thought there's nothing more important in life than being able to take a walk and not be distracted by a phone. That was kind of a switching point for me. Before that, I was feeling the responsibility to make sure things happen and go well and fall together. And I was that kind of a person that liked to see everything fall together perfectly. But at that point, I realized that there's some things in life that are more important. And we can get to church, and we can not know what's going to happen exactly, and we can figure it out when we get there. I don't have to take a phone call when I'm walking with my family. Next question. So how did you handle this, and what did you do about it? You're still working.
I can go. So one thing I wanted to add to the first question before I take the second one is, and I guess this actually builds right on what Ernest just shared, but how did it affect you and your spouse and your family? And I guess this is an ongoing thing, but I work from home, which means that I can work until it's time to go eat dinner, which means you can show up at the dinner table with your mind somewhere else. And I've had a few hard days, which, I mean, you're going to have those on the job, but where you come and you're present in body with your family, but you're not present there in your mind at all. Which, again, you're going to have that happen, but that's probably the biggest way it has, I would say, some of my stress has affected my family, is I'm not present with them in my mind, able to enjoy a walk to church or an evening on the front porch where you're eating supper. That's just one instance I remember where I wasn't there with them in my mind. How did you handle it, or what did you do about it? So I mentioned the relationship burnout, where you just get tired of a person who seems to be taking advantage of you. Learn to say no to those people, or even if it's an ongoing relationship, learn to say no sometimes. Can really put a damper on how much they're going to ask you for help if they realize that you don't always just give them something. This past spring, currently, what do you do about it? I guess the one thing that comes to mind is I came down, so this was the beginning of March. I came down one day. Actually, it was right after, it was the day there was the church planter's prayer call in the morning, and several people were talking about going to Reach the following week. So I looked up the schedule, and I saw it could coincide with a work trip to PA. So I came down and just kind of threw out to my wife. I said, "Hey, should I go to Reach next week?" And she didn't. Usually I throw a question like that out and see how she responds, and then we talk about it, whatever. And she's like, "No, you should go. It would be good for you." It was the rare time where she, rather than like we talk back and forth and discuss if it would be good, if it would work, she's just like, "Go. Don't worry about what it does for us. Like, don't worry about leaving us behind. It would be good for you." So something like that. That was a bit. And the day that I spent there brings up another thing. But while I was there sitting in a workshop, she messaged me and said she's miscarrying. So I have all this stress from church, from work. It's a day off from work, and then I have that. And I've told people since then that I think that day was probably the greatest emotional roller coaster I was ever on. I felt really inspired. I was very inspired by just being at a place where you're being fed. But at the same time, you have a 6-hour drive home and you're not exactly sure what's going to be there when you get there. And so it's just this back and forth all day long. But I look back, like that was a very special day too, and I'm glad it's back there. I think another big thing for me just dealing with stress is having people to talk to. There's several ways that's good for me. So again, my boss understood he's faced some of the same things, and he's also has the power to do something about my workload. And that was invaluable, those couple weeks with him. Several of you we talked to just because I knew you've been through some similar situations in church life. Some of you are relatives. Some of you are friends that we knew before we were in church planting. But just having a network of people like that is invaluable when you're in a crisis. Even if they haven't been there, even if all you do is it's somebody to unload to and they don't really have anything to say. I notice a lot of times just being able to say what's on your heart helps you speaking out loud helps you process stuff, and also if it's, again, some of the conversations we've had with some of you, it's like you've been in the same place. There's other people, you're not weird, you're not strange, you're not, I don't know, maybe we're all crazy, I don't know, but like there's other people facing the same thing. It's maybe not normal, and yet it is. And there's a lot of security that can come in that. Another thing just on the church level was not holding on to people. Being free to say that this is maybe not the place for you can lead to a freely letting go rather than holding on because of how it might make you feel bad if they leave or make you look like you're better if they stay. Just be free to let people in God's hands. Place your security. I guess that comes down to the biggest thing, and you're going to have a whole list of stuff later on, but find your security in God and in your relationship with Him. That has probably been, as I look back to that week, I spent a lot of time reading Psalms. David was there. There's an immense amount of support in the Psalms for stress, for burnout, for broken relationships. That was huge for me.
For us, coming back from Africa, dear friend of mine said, you need to talk to someone, reflecting on what Anthony said. And for us, it was a time of debriefing. We sat down with Henry and Deb Blank, and this was a couple months, half a year after we were back. And one of the things that I've felt, I guess it's pride, but we're going to be okay. We're good. And he's like, you're not good. You need to talk to someone. And as only a friend that loves you like a brother can say. And so we went and took a couple days, and we sat down, and if any of you have been in Henry Blank's office, his one wall is a white wall. It's a whiteboard. And just simply unpacking. And that first wall was what was the bad? What was the hard? And did we fill that thing up? And there were a lot of tears, a lot of emotions. And then the second wall is what was the good? What is the good that happened in your experience, in your situation, in your circumstance? And it was really good for us to actually relive that. And then on the third wall, he said, what do you think God wants to do with all of this? Mm-hmm. And that's really where the rubber hit the road. And God started touching our heart. Maybe this was not unintentional. Maybe God allowed this for a deeper purpose. What does He want to do with it? The good, the bad, the ugly, and then God shows up. What does He want to do with it? And that was huge. That was powerful for us. And we actually did that, not with Henry and Deb, with another brother here a couple months ago. again, very similar. And again, it puts into focus the pain, the hard, the good, and then what does God want to do with it? And that's what he wants to touch in our hearts and lives. So for us, that was huge, to talk about that, to lay that out, and then to bring God into the middle of it at the foot of the cross and saying, here it is. Here's our emotions. Here's who we are. Touch us.
So after we got saved, Marlon and I got born again after we were married for 5 years and had a couple children. And after we got saved, we began praying the prayer that God would give us the gift of hospitality. And God answered that above and beyond what we thought. What I didn't realize was, maybe partly because of my own, I don't know, immaturity or whatever, that, when you're in a season where you're constantly needed and people keep coming to you for counsel and advice. And we were living in Boston among the immigrant community, and we loved the immigrants. We had people in our home all the time. I mean, almost every evening of the week was filled with something. And at one point, our children came to us and they said, Mom and Dad, we still want you to. And it really set me and Marlon back. And several years ago, God allowed some really, really hard things in our life that were very painful. And I discovered that it's okay to not be okay. And it was our turn to sit on the back bench of the church with tears running and to not have anything to give right then. And it was the first time, I think, in my life as a believer that I was on the end of I just need to receive. And I need to be humble, allow myself to be humble enough to receive from the body of Christ what they have to give. And it was hard. It was hard because I prefer to give. I prefer to be active in ministry. And instead, the Lord was actually merciful in allowing us to do this, to see the importance of receiving healing from others. And one of the things I would really encourage the wives in the audience is to trust the Lord in your husband's life. Marlon has taught me the importance of saying no, that I'm not everyone's savior. I don't have to say yes to everyone. Saying yes to everyone, isn't necessarily always the right thing to do. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is say no. And that was a very hard lesson for me to learn because I like to make everyone happy and be a people pleaser, and just trusting God in my husband's life as he led me as his wife. And when he said, no, I think that's going to be too much for you, to believe that I was hearing from the Lord and to be okay with that.
So for me, with the faith crisis, like I said, I was out of commission for about 3 years as a spiritual leader. Thankfully, my employer was compassionate, and they gave me a chance to do administrative work and things like that while I found my way again. And yes, like Darla, I'm sitting on the bench receiving, and I wasn't really receiving anything spiritual specifically. I wasn't praying. I wasn't sure who to pray to, things like that. But I just found comfort in being with the body of Christ. Here's people that at least are praying. And if I can't pray right now, here's people that can be praying. And so that was helpful. There was awkward times. I remember one particular Sunday school class, a young fellow was in charge of the Sunday school. And he said, I want you all to write down on a piece of paper 3 things that you can say, I believe. And I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to say? I was kind of going through a cold sweat because I was at a place where there was a lot of youth and they had no idea what I was going through. And I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to pull this off? And it wasn't the time to unload and dump everything right in the middle of the Sunday school class. So I'm thinking how I'm going to handle this. And then suddenly it came to me. I can write, by faith, I believe. So I wrote 3 things. By faith, I believe this. By faith, I believe that. Could I say I believe? Not really. But by faith, by that point, I could say by faith. That was actually progress at that point. And so when it came my turn, I did that and went right to the next person, and nobody in the group knew what was going on except probably my mentor. I remember during that same time, I was telling about my experience to a group of trusted coworkers, one of whom was a well-known counselor, and he made the comment, well, maybe you'll write a book about this someday. And kind of surprising coming from him, because I don't think I must have conveyed how bad a shape I was in, or else he wouldn't have said that, because he's a pretty compassionate man. But I just remember thinking, brother, writing books about this, that's the last thing on my list. If I can just keep my nose out of the water without drowning, that's where I'm at right now. So think about that when you're talking to people, at whatever kind of burnout they're experiencing. Acknowledge where they're at the best you can. Give them some time, give them some space. Some things I'm currently doing to avoid burnout since this experience 8 years ago where my daughter told me that I should stay off the phone. So I've tried to do some things like that. Right now in my life, I'm probably the most behind that I've ever been. I haven't done my taxes yet for 2024. I have a mountain of responsibilities that are not getting done. I have people waiting on me to do things so that they can proceed with the next thing that they're supposed to do. One of them sitting here grinning. And I could let this pressure me. And there would have been a time in my life when this would have drove me crazy. But at this point, I'm taking time for hobbies. I'm doing that in the middle of this crazy state where things are piled up. But it's like it's more important for me to maintain my sanity than it is to make everybody happy that would like to be happy right now. And so that's one thing I'm doing. All right, looking back, would you do anything differently? You may have mentioned that a bit, but if you have anything more to say on that, you can.
I tremble a little bit at this question because I feel like there's a lot of things I would have done differently looking back. And now the problem is the future will tell if I've actually learned anything. But as I look at if you call it relationship burnout in our church, and since I know this is a group of people who is either has planted a church with others, is thinking about it, or wants to, don't wait until the perfect time to address some perceived conflict in the group or known conflict, because the perfect time isn't going to come until it's too late, until you have to do something about it. A quote that I heard recently that spoke to me a lot on that was, good intentions are worthless until they're turned into action. Because as I look back at some of the conflict and differences that we had, I had a lot of good intentions to deal with them, but I never did. And you can create this picture, and the speaker that I was listening to where the quote came from said this. He said, you can create this picture in your mind that deceives you into thinking that you're somebody that you're actually not, because you're thinking about what you're going to be doing, and you never actually do it. And so you're not actually the person that you think you are. And so that would be my encouragement. Yeah, looking back, don't let stuff go on and hope that it's going to get better someday, because it probably isn't going to unless you address it head on.
I think it says looking back, I'm going to say currently, what are we doing? Like Darla said, we are saying no to a lot of stuff. We are focusing on our children, on our family, and resting and trusting that God will show us what's next, what that looks like, and a willingness and a ready to step into that in His timing, and putting the needs of our family and our children spiritually, physically, and just being intentional. That is something that we're doing. And like I said, we do feel God's grace, and we feel Him meeting us And I praise him for the healing that is happening in our life and the things he's doing. So our looking back is present tense. That's now happening.
I think from a wife's perspective, from a female's perspective, one of the things that I feel like I have learned through this is there's seasons to do, and then there's seasons just to be and to rest. And I think especially if you're involved in church planting or intentional outreach, ministry, whatever, we can put a lot, at least from my perspective, for myself, put a lot of self-worth and into what I'm doing. Am I doing enough? Which you never are, right? And so to just rest in who I am as a daughter of God, and that my love is not, God's love towards me as a daughter isn't based on how many people I have coming through my home or how many meals I'm feeding people, and those are all good things. And I one of my happiest places is when my house is full of happy people talking, and I'm able to like keep shoving food at people that Marlon has made because he's a better cook, or offering I love to fellowship. But as every woman knows, having people in your home, there's a price that comes with that. You're preparing for guests, and then if you're the hostess, no matter how much you love it, and I love it, you are overseeing all the, your husband can get caught up in some amazing, deep theological discussion. Meanwhile, I'm chasing after a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old to keep him from beating up the child that's visiting or whatever. Like, it gets chaotic, and then when everyone leaves, and I'm one that when you're at my house, I want you to rest. I'll clean the mess up later. I'd rather fellowship, but we still have to clean the house up eventually. And so there's just, I think one of the things for me has been being honest with Marlon. When he says, hey, how do you feel about doing X, Y, and Z and having them over? I used to think that somehow I'm not spiritual if I say, I don't feel like I have it in me right now. But instead, his heart is that I would be honest and just say, I feel overwhelmed. However, I know that if you really feel like we're supposed to do whatever he's asking, that God's grace is going to be there, but to be honest. And too often, I think I wasn't honest because I felt that wasn't being, holy or submissive or something. And then we all ended up paying the price because I was extra tired, worn out, burned out. And in the last few years, recognizing the signs of burnout in our children, because we had so many people in our home so often, and I was actually addicted to the feelings that came of like, I'm doing really good things here and missing the needs of my children. And in many ways right now, we're having to honor some of their needs and to put them above the neighbors, which can come really hard if you have a mission mindset that our children are our greatest mission field. And the other thing is, the Lord has really been working in my heart. And what does the Bible say for women? If you're married today, your calling is to love your husband, to love your children, to be a keeper at home. And that is as a wife and as a mother, that's my highest earthly calling. And that comes before anything else that he's called me to do, and that's okay. And then whatever out of that, comes the ability to reach into the neighborhood or whatever ministry he has outside of that. But instead of draining, it'll actually be life-giving. And so I'm still learning those tools, and I'm also blessed to have a very honest husband who is faithful to tell me if I'm making too many commitments, or I've learned to go to him and say, hey, someone's asking me to do this, or they want me to mentor them, or what are your thoughts? And because my tendency is to go, absolutely, and he will go, do you think you have the space for that right now? Oh, well, maybe not. Then don't. Because for everything good that you say yes to, there's something else that's probably going to take it away from, and that's okay in its right time. So yeah, I'm learning to just truly rest in who I am as a daughter of God, even if I'm not involved in some amazing ministry, which I love outreach. Hearing about working among immigrants or city ministry, my heart yearns for that to a certain extent, but truly there is joy even serving in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, and just being a content homemaker where I'm at.
I might mention a few things, a few tools. These are obviously a work in progress, more from the previous question. One is I find it interesting that, Nathan, you mentioned the Psalms. The Psalms have become really important to me. I think it gives us the language to speak to God with. And so I would, the Psalms are incredible. And actually, I think it was last week, a verse from Psalm 16, verse 11, I was kind of holding on to. It says, you make known to me the path of life. In your presence, there is fullness of joy. And my brothers know that one of the things I've been trying to work on this year with varying degrees of success is to be more joyful. And what the psalmist is saying there, that in God's presence, joy is natural. It just is. And so, when I'm feeling stressed, I try to invite God into where I'm at right then, and because He's with me, there is joy. And then another thing that I think is helpful is to recognize two things: recognizing and embracing your limits, or another way of saying that is identify who you are, and then who I'm not. And actually, Wes and I were having a good conversation about this last night. It's easy to. And I'll use Ernest for an example. We kind of have a joke on the committee. There's about, 5 or 6 of us? And we say 6 of us are doing the work that Ernest used to do himself. And, it's easy for me to compare myself to another person and say, I try to live up to some other expectation. But to recognize I'm not Ernest, I'm who I am. And I think that's just a really important thing to keep in mind.
Just to set the record straight, they're doing way more than I ever did. This group is 3 times the size they used to be, so obviously that makes more work. So, how did you handle it looking back? What would you do anything differently? So with the faith crisis, I asked that question a lot. Is there anything I could have done that would have helped me avoid this faith crisis? And I'm not sure how to answer that question. People get faith crises for a variety of different reasons, and this has become a whole ministry of its own, is ministering to people with faith crises. And so maybe God wanted me to go through this for the purpose of helping others. Maybe, I know it did me a lot of good. Helped me become a lot more humble, helped me become a lot more compassionate for people who are dealing with faith issues that can't just pull it together when they wanted to pull something together. So in that sense, it's helped me a lot personally. I don't feel near as invincible as I used to. I was probably overly confident when I got into the billboard ministry at age 36. Probably a bit overconfident, thinking, I'm 36, I can probably handle this, and not going into it realizing that this is a huge spiritual battle that needs to be done with the Spirit of God and things like that. I would probably put a lot more emphasis on preparing in my spirit. Also, there was a lot of questions that I had about various things related to the foundations of Christianity that I figured if I ever researched it, it would all make sense, it would all be good, so no need to think through it at all. And put it on the back burner, never really thought much about it until I got involved in the billboard ministry. And suddenly, all these things that I had put on the back burner got ripped off the shelf and shoved in front of my eyes, and the carpet got pulled out from under my feet and things like that. This happens a lot for people in ministry, church planting. You get exposed to ideas and concepts that you're not familiar with, and so I don't think you can spend too much time. Yeah, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can spend too much time, but it's hard to spend too much time getting help from other people about how to think through the difficult questions of life, the major foundations of our faith, things like that. I recommend Faith Builders Winter Term as a good place to go to shore up some of those foundations. I don't think I have anything more on that question. So next question is, this is the catch-all now. Anything more you want to say on this topic? Things you've thought personally, things you've observed in others, things you've heard from people that might be good. This is a chance just to finish up here on whatever you want to say.
One more thing to the sisters, and that is not to be afraid to ask for prayer. We were, a number of years ago, we were at a conference, and I met this older sister, and for the first time, and there was something about her that really drew me. And the last morning of the conference, I sensed the Holy Spirit prompting me to go over to her and ask her to pray for me. And I really wrestled because I didn't know her that well, and I felt very vulnerable, and do people do this? And I went over to her, and I just knelt beside her chair, and I said, I just feel like God is asking me to ask you to lay hands on me and pray over me, and I don't really know what or why, but just can you do that for me? And she said, absolutely. And she just prayed a beautiful prayer of blessing, and I wasn't aware of how drastically our lives were going to change in the next 6 months. I had no idea what was coming, but I believe too often in my own pride maybe, or fear, it kept me back from being vulnerable with other sisters in Christ. And it's astonishing to me how many of women, as the more I sit with them and hear their stories, how many are burnt out, whether it's in being a wife, a mother, part of the church planting or whatever. But prayer, ask God to bring people in your life that can lift your arms up when you're too tired to lift them up yourself. And God has blessed me with a very rich community of sisters scattered throughout really the U.S. That I can reach out to. And that is one thing that has really been helping to build me back up. And I can reach out and say, I just need prayer. I don't even have to go into great detail, but there's a safe place for me to say, pray for me. I don't have to be all that. It's okay to be weak. Sometimes it's okay to be struggling and hurting. And so really I would encourage you sisters to humble yourself and let God minister to you through other sisters.
I think it was at the first Church Planners Forum back in 2014. We were in the process of moving to New York City, and Clayton Shank from York shared that their family, they had one night a week that they considered family night. And it was, I don't know what night of the week it was, but that was on the calendar, and it had to be something very, very important to override that. And that gave us the inspiration, and we have done something like that more or less since then. When the children are little, it's probably not as big of a thing, but it's a foundation that they have, and it's a night where you're together as a family. Do something can be hard when you have 2 to 12 years old to do something all together, but even if we play a game with the older ones and the younger ones are at the table with us, whatever, just something you're together as a family. It's a safeguard to keep dad or mom from going away every night of the week in various ministry. Another thing that my wife and I do, and this, I think, because of how much I look forward to it, shows how valuable it is, but with our schedule, we do once a quarter where we give each other what we call a golden day, where just go out, maybe eat breakfast together and probably eat supper together, but the rest of the time in between, do what you want. Children are taken care of. And so that's where I bring up the idea of a hobby again, like Ernest said. Know something you enjoy. Whether it's, okay, I like reading, so I get inspired when I go to a bookstore. It's enjoyable, it's relaxing, you can look, you can browse, I feel better when I come out. Or whatever it is, just whatever you enjoy doing, make some time in your schedule to do that so you have a getaway. Another thing for me, and this is again living in the city, I believe that you can worship and pray to God anywhere, but there's something about getting into nature a little bit more. In Richmond, we have the river. It's not real far away. A 15-minute walk gets you out on the bank of the river. If you go first thing on a Sunday morning, it's usually pretty empty. And every time I do that and come back, it's like, why didn't I do this more often? Because there's just something inspiring about being in nature. We have a pretty large cemetery that's a lot closer to us that I get to more often, but it's a little bit of a reprieve. There's nature there. You're not surrounded as much by houses and streets. Two other thoughts I have on some of this. I don't know if any of you ever read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, but John Mark Comer asked the question. He says, how often in the Bible do you read that Jesus was in a hurry? And yet none of us would argue that Jesus was. His answer is, of course, no. You don't read that Jesus was ever in a hurry. Yet we would all say that Jesus was the most effective person to ever live. So how did he do it? And he lays out a lot of ideas. And yeah, one of them is also just taking a Sabbath, which, again, most of the people that recommend doing something like that are paid pastors, so it's easy for them to take a day off a week to do nothing. But just create a day where there's no pressure, no responsibility. Okay, as a parent, you can't get away from that. But outside responsibility, no schedule. There's something incredibly freeing about that. Obvious things like create margin, get enough rest, are things that I'm working at, trying to do. I'm not sure how successful I am, but back to the thing about Jesus, another book that I read, which may have helped me some and through all this, hopefully, is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzaro. And he also mentions knowing Jesus came to earth and he knew what his mission was, and he stuck to it. And some of you already alluded to where if you don't know what your mission is, you try to do a little bit of everything and you burn out. Mm-hmm. And that has helped us even. I'll just give an example. So with what we've been through in our church the past year, we weren't planning to come here, well, for other reasons too. We weren't necessarily planning to come here this year. But I said, you know what, for this season of life, we need to network with people. So it's a lot of work to take a family away from home for a few days at a time, several times throughout the summer. It's a lot of going away, but we have a purpose. And take that same thing into your home, into your neighborhood. Don't try to do everything. Don't try to serve the immigrants and the homeless and the whatever all else is there. You can't do it all. But if you know what you're there for, you can say, if something comes up, you can say, does this fit with my goal or doesn't it? And then you can say yes or no. And that has helped us decide, is this a good thing that we should do today? Or should we stay at home? And if you know what's more important right then, you know it can help you make decisions and not burn out so quickly.
Okay, this has all been very good. Thank you for sharing that. A few more random things that I'll mention here. So, as it relates to faith crises, this can happen for a variety of reasons. I've met a lot of people now, last 14 years, that have had faith crises. And I've sometimes asked people, what would give you a faith crisis? Do you know what it would be? I've also asked people, what is Satan's pressure points on you right now? First question is, what is his goal for you? If you don't know what his goal is for you right now, then answer the question of where are the pressure points right now? That's Satan's goal, at least some of it. Some of his goal might be hidden, but some of them are obvious, and so pay attention to those. People can experience a faith crisis from intellectual reasons, experiential reasons. My best friend from years ago is currently an agnostic. For him, it was experiential. Sometimes it's loss of loved ones, different things like that can bring it on. And surround yourself by people, even if you can't talk, surround yourself by people, allow them to pray for you. don't have to explain everything. You don't have to answer all their questions. They might not understand, but they can still pray for you, and you can ask for that. Comment on social capacity. So all of us have a certain amount of social capacity, and some people can do 10 hours a day. Some people can do 15 hours a day. We've had different people come think about moving to State College or move to State College and would wonder what kind of job they should do while they're there. So I asked them, how much of a people person are you? Can you be with people all day long and enjoy people in the evening as well? And most people know right away what their answer to that is. Some say, absolutely not. And other people are like, I think I could do that. So think about your work in relation to that. If your capacity is on the lower end, then you're probably not going to want a job that involves dealing with people all day long, because then you're not going to have energy on evenings and weekends to interact with the local population. If you have a strong social capacity and you can do some of both, then that's great. So that would have to do with interacting with people on the job, as well as interacting with people from the town that you're wanting to minister to. So sometimes just working on a job in a high stress environment can wear you out. And a lot of people, when they're at the end of a day like that, it's like, I'm shot. I want to go burying myself in a corner. Now I got to be a dad, and I'm even supposed to be a minister or an evangelist besides. And just work itself is stressing me out. So people have different levels of social capacity. Please do not compare yourself to someone else and what level of social capacity they have. God made us all different. And so give yourself some break, and give others a break too if you're wondering why they're not doing more than what they're doing. And then at different times in our life, we have more or less social capacity as well, as the Weavers are saying here. So just because you could do a lot last year doesn't mean you can do a lot this year. And we have to give our teammates room to have some differences and understand that this year they're just not going to be able to do as much as what they did last year. And this may go on for another 2 years or 5 years, or we're not sure how long, 10 years maybe. And give each other some space in that way. Relational conflicts. I know that this works on all of us, but probably some of us, it works on us more than others. I'm the kind of person that will lay awake at night thinking about conversations and rerunning the conversation through my mind and things like that. And I had to come to the place at one point where I just said, I'm not going to get into situations where I need to help resolve relational conflicts. I cannot handle any more than what I'm handling at this point. I know that it would be nice to be involved and it would be nice to help, but I can't handle any more than so much. And then I found out from a counselor that she can only handle no more than 2 clients at a given time in her counseling work with a certain kind of disorder, because she's like, it works on me. So I just have to space out clients with this particular kind of disorder to 2 at a time, because I can't handle more than 2 at a time. And it's like, oh, okay. So even professionals that do this for a living, they have to set their boundaries as well. So back to the relational conflicts. I did find a therapeutic thing for that, and I use this for all sorts of stress, but to just lay down either in the middle of the day. I live with constant headaches, so I lay down sometimes with ice packs on my forehead, and to just say the Lord's Prayer very slowly, very deliberately, think it through, think about how this applies to my life, and when I get all done, go back through it again. I said the Lord's Prayer. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, is what I go through. Sometimes I do the Lord's Prayer as well, but Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, and just go through that and picture that in my mind, let my body relax, make my body relax, focus on something else, and that helps to keep me from getting too worked up over the things that are going round and round in my mind. Okay. Anything else you all want to say? All right, it's your time for questions. Do we have another mic we can use for the audience? In the meantime, we'll use this one. Who has a question or a comment? Maybe you have something helpful for the group as well. What's been helpful for you in avoiding burnout, or something you want to share about looking for burnout, being aware of it? Okay, Ben?
So one question I have for all of you, I think one theme I picked up on based on what you shared is that one primary root of burnout is we can't say no. So we do boundaries really bad, so we can't say no. We do that because we want to say yes to everybody. And we do that because we want to be their Jesus. Why do we want to be their Jesus? Like psychologically, what's under that? Why do we do that?
Because we haven't found the security in who we are in Jesus. And so we think that by helping someone else, even if we're not necessarily thinking about being their Jesus, if I can do this for this person, it makes me look good. Or it can be something I can use to build up myself, rather than getting that from God, which is where I should be getting it.
I would throw out maybe a slightly different perspective, and I believe it can be. I don't think it's a nuanced answer, but I think it can be too. For Darla and I, God has done so much in our life. There's been so many miracles, so many. And I remember soon after, we were married 5 years when we got born again, and our passion for people to experience what we had experienced, that freedom, but then not leading ourselves well in that, and it become overwhelming. So I can honestly say it was never about us lifting ourselves up. It was passion with not leading ourselves well.
And yeah, I would just add to what he shared and what I shared, is that that's probably my temptation. It could be something entirely different for other people.
So I just love seeing people thrive, grow, prosper, do well in life. And I think that my desire to save people and be their Jesus is because there's a bit of Jesus in me. And he would like to do the same thing. Maybe it's not all pure, but I think that's part of the drive. And remember a counselor friend saying years ago that he had to come to the place where he was okay with the fact that if he didn't help someone, they would probably go to someone who could not help them as well, and the person would not do as well, and still be okay with it.
So my question is about physical exercise, which it may be geared more towards depression, which is a little bit different than burnout. But has physical exercise been a part of staying healthy and sustainable?
In my dreams. I do some of it, but I would like to do a lot more.
So for me, going on walks has been very therapeutic. I feel like I have more to give my family if I care about my health, and if I can't go outside, the treadmill. So I think it plays into it. But yeah, just going out and in times of extreme stress, it has helped me process. And as I walk, just talk to the Lord, or just listen to music, or just walk or run, just to kind of work off that extra anxiety that wants to creep up. And so, yeah, I would say it has played somewhat into it.
But yeah, it's a good thing, even though Darla's the only one that can give a positive testimony here. I can give a partially positive testimony.
I feel like that there's more wrapped into Marlon's comment about leading himself well that I haven't gotten. So maybe you already feel like you defined that, but I'm not sure that I'm completely getting what's in that phrasing. If you mind opening that up a little bit more for us, thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Paul made this comment. He said, "Follow me as I follow Christ," and that was not a reflection on him. But Paul knew who he was in Christ. Paul, I think one of the things about leading yourself well is knowing, having the emotional intelligence to know, what is an internal curiosity. So if I feel myself getting frustrated, the why. Why am I frustrated? A lot of times we deal with these peripherals, but we don't pursue what is actually the root of it. And so why am I frustrated with my children, with this situation, why do I feel hurt over this? And to not in some weird psychological way but bring that to the foot of the cross and to have an internal curiosity, not just looking at what is happening, but why is that happening? What are those things? And then making the right move. Maybe I'm not spending enough time with the Lord. Maybe I'm not simply spending enough time with my children. Maybe I'm not knowing what are God's priorities and what are the things that I want to do and what are God's priorities. And leading yourself well is to seek from your family, from others, from input, what are God's priorities for my life right now? And different parts of this have, the speakers have alluded to that, but actually being in touch with that, knowing what those things are, is leading yourself well. And if there's a deficiency within me, if I'm getting short-tempered, why am I getting short-tempered? Not just, I'm short-tempered again today, Jesus help me, but why? Why is that? And what are the things that are leading me to make the decisions, the reactions, an internal curiosity where I actually have the courage to look within myself and to say, why is that happening? And then to do what are the Lord's priorities to address that and to fix that. Brotherhood, hugely important part of that. My relationship with my wife, there's been so many times that she's been truly a helpmeet when she's like, hey, you really need to talk to son so-and-so. And, and it's like, oh, yeah, so why haven't I? Why have I, and how can I improve that? So I don't know if that answers your question, but having that internal curiosity about why are my reactions the way they are and what is driving it, and then understanding that within yourself.
I'd just like to add a thought to Marlon's point there. I'd just like to add a thought to Marlon's point of leading himself well. So if you get into the Anabaptist circles and you start pushing the narrative, leading yourself well, you're going to hear pushback against that. And it comes from business, it comes from John Maxwell, it comes from all these other areas. And another one that comes is self-awareness. So the scripture says, sorry, I'm also getting nervous. I don't know why. I usually don't do that. The core thing of the faith is developing your virtues, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, and self-examination. And at the root of Christianity, of the faith, is, before we go into communion, we're just, I'm getting nervous, I don't know what my problem is. You're to self-examine yourself. And we're to do that before we even go into communion. So that's the core of our faith. So when you hear the modern words, lead yourself or become self-aware, I think that's an offshoot of what the faith is. So be prepared for that. There are people who get pushed back against those words. But it's rooted in the faith of developing your virtues, developing your personal life in prayer and fasting and almsgiving, and being self-aware, which is daily confession and repentance. So I think the spiritual terminology behind that actually is there. And I think it's important that we know how to communicate that. Sorry for being nervous. I don't know what happened. I'll get over it.
That's fine. If you're going through a crisis, we'll all be here for you.
You should get me out of it.
That's a good point you made. Thank you. Think about our terminology.
It's okay, Kevin. We're a safe space. So if we so he
You need to
mentioned,
hold your hand up higher on the mic.
if you mention, Kevin mentioned the business world and so forth, but so if there's anyone here that's sort of a geek when it comes to the body, like nervous systems, things like that. So we have this we have the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. So if anybody ever heard those terms before, raise your hand. Okay. Oh, great. Okay. All right. So your sympathetic nervous system is all about go, 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 and we idolize that. But the parasympathetic nervous system is all about rest. And Jesus knew how to perfectly balance the two. He said, come away or come apart and rest a while. And so I think we need to learn from Jesus. It's okay to rest, and we've heard that. So there's a sense where some of these things are, we want to spiritualize everything, but there's a sense where we live in bodies, and we just have to accept that. We have nervous systems that function, and we need to care for them. So let's not spiritualize everything. Let's also just enjoy the embodied sense that God has given us.
Thank you. You may have heard that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is rest. The most spiritual thing you can do is relax.
So I'm really inspired by the realism of this panel up here. And just thinking about you being vulnerable, sharing your weakness. You're all church planners, right? You're leaders, you're pillars, but you're expressing weakness. But here you're expressing it to other church planners. What's it like expressing weakness to the people that are looking up to you at the time?
I had one other thought when you asked the question, and that, again, I don't know, there might be other opinions here, but Pete Scazzera also shares that when he changed his preaching from preaching a sermon that had all the answers, and he preached from his own weakness, he started connecting with the church a whole lot more. In other words, when you're sitting in the pew and you can realize that this pastor in front of you isn't some superhuman, and yet he's not just sharing weakness, he's actually maybe preaching from it and how to overcome it, or I take inspiration from that. It's okay to stand up front and be vulnerable and say, hey, this is something I face, but you know what? Here's a book. I found answers. I can go forward with that.
One of the things that God has been doing in our life is currently doing is just showing us how much we get. It's a human tendency. God shows us something. He lays something on our heart, whether that's church planning, and we're excited about it, and Darla alluded to this, and very quickly, I think we can make that thing an idol. Doing that thing, I think back years ago, when we got married, I said I wanted one child. This was before we were saved, and then Darla said, well, you can't have a brat, you need two, and then, 29 years later, we have 11. Somewhere in there, God showed up and did a work in our heart, which was beautiful. But then what happened for a season of our time is where that beautiful thing that God did in our heart became idolatry, or we didn't look at it as such, but it became something that he did not want from us, holding that thing up that God had done in our heart. It's the same way with, I believe, it's a good question. I believe leading in vulnerability, leading in who we really are, bringing God into the middle of that it gives a power to our message because we're broken people. It's not about us, it's about him. And letting him receive the honor and glory for that in spite of us. And I think so often I go back to Revelation, keys to overcoming, blood of Jesus Christ and the word of your testimony. By sharing it, there's something powerful that happens in your life and it happens in others' lives too. And that's a part, I believe, of God's heart for the gospel going forward.
And being married to a leader, I can testify that I know, like, it creates a lot of respect when, you know, whether it's a wife or the children see their father, the leader of the home, walking with honesty and humility and being willing to admit when he's made mistakes. One of our older sons made the comment one time, "I have a hard time trusting a man that never cries." He said, "How can I trust someone that's never vulnerable to anybody?" But he said when a man is just honest about himself and his faults and weaknesses and yet seeking Christ in it, he said that's someone that you can trust. And yeah.
Another answer to your question is, how does it feel? That's why we only got these 5 up here instead of the 5 that declined. Being vulnerable just doesn't always feel good, and there's times in our life when we're just not up to it.
So that's okay.
Okay, anybody else? Thanks for being vulnerable, sharing. I want you all to leave from here having some hope, some courage. God is a redeemer. He can keep bad things from going to waste. He can take even the difficulties of our lives and turn it into something beautiful. So if you've had things in the past that have been difficult, there's hope for that. And for whatever you face in the future, God's grace will be there for that too.